Hi, I'm Ellie. I'm a neurodivergent mum of two, and in this video I'm going to be talking about PDA. And no, I do not mean public displays of affection. PDA stands for Pathological Demand Avoidance. It's a profile on the autism spectrum, which is increasingly being recognised among medical professionals, but, as in our case, some professionals are still reluctant to acknowledge its existence, which is a problem when your kid very clearly has it. So, little disclaimer here, although PDA affects kids and adults alike, I'm just going to be focusing on the children with PDA in this video because that's just what I know the most about. I'm not coming at this from the perspective of an expert, I'm just a mum, but I've read a lot about this over the last few years and we found a few things that have helped us to cope better as a family, so I just wanted to share my experiences. A lot of kids with PDA get misdiagnosed as having behavioural problems like ODD, which is oppositional defiant disorder, or even an attachment disorder. This is because although PDAers are autistic by definition, they do not always display their autism in the same way as children who are more traditionally autistic. Let me explain what I mean. So we typically think of autism as being a neurotype where people obviously struggle with social interactions. They may avoid eye contact, be more reserved, struggle to express themselves clearly. They usually have sensory sensitivities, may be unable to recognize social cues, not speak at certain times, or indeed not speak at all, etc. PDAers, on the other hand, while they do face a lot of the same challenges as regular autistics, such as sensory aversions and other things, they tend to be more able to hide their quirks, which is called masking. They usually make quite good eye contact, may speak confidently, seem very bright or even precocious for their age, and they just generally seem like they kind of understand social situations. However, this apparent ease with social skills is generally only superficial. A trained professional will usually be able to notice the subtle differences in these people, such as their eye contact might be slightly off timing-wise or even be too intense. Their ability to speak confidently might only be limited to certain subjects, often very specific ones, and although they seem to know how to act in different social situations, they might not understand why they have to do these things. Additionally, PDAers tend to experience quite intense mood swings, often flipping between extremes. However, the most obvious characteristic of PDA is the resistance to carrying out everyday tasks. And this isn't a case of them just occasionally refusing to brush their teeth or not wanting to go to school because they don't feel like it that day. It goes much, much deeper than that. They have a crippling anxiety around any tasks or activities that their brain perceives as a demand and therefore a threat. As soon as they feel pressure to do anything, the amygdala goes into overdrive. And the amygdala, in case you didn't know, is the part of our brain that controls our response to stress and our survival instinct. It causes the basic human instincts of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn to come into play. So when the amygdala is very active, the parts of the brain that respond to logic and reasoning become suppressed. PDAers often have different reactions to demands depending on their personality. So one child may have more of a fight reaction and become aggressive if they feel under pressure. Some would freeze and be unable to move or speak. Some may simply run away, and some will fawn, which means that they submit to the demand, but out of sheer terror rather than willingness. Some kids will go through all of these reactions within the space of a few minutes. So one could easily see how these responses, at least the fight, flight, and freeze ones, could easily be misinterpreted as bad behaviour. You can just hear the well-meaning but misguided parental responses. "I don't know why you're so angry. There's no reason for it. Don't you run away from me. Come back here right now. Why can't you just do as you're told?" PDAers can also become quite skilled at using social techniques to try and avoid demands. For example, they may try to distract you by constantly changing the subject in the hope that you will forget what you wanted them to do. Or they may make very elaborate excuses. They might start giggling and run away when you try to get them dressed, for example. They might go deathly silent when you ask them to choose what to have for dinner. Or, they may even lash out and hit you when you say it's time to go to bed. As counterintuitive as it sounds, this is not coming from a place of disobedience or defiance that needs to be corrected through discipline. It comes from a place of panic and fear, even if it doesn't look like it. Human beings are very capable of smiling even when they are terrified on the inside, and autistic humans are even more likely to display facial expressions that are out of sync with the emotions that they are feeling on the inside. It doesn't take a genius to realize that responding to fear with punishment will only reinforce and exacerbate it. In fact, it will likely lead to worsened meltdowns, mental health problems, and increase the likeliness of extreme behavior and ultimately PTSD. Another key feature of this demand avoidance is that it also includes self-imposed demands. This means that your child can really want to do something, but still be unable to because the expectations they are placing on themselves are just too overwhelming. This can sometimes result in sabotage. For example, a PDA child who really wants to draw a picture for a school project might sit down and get started and then seemingly inexplicably throw their crayons all over the floor because once again, that pervasive drive for autonomy has caused the amygdala to sense danger where there is none. It kind of reminds me of those scenes in movies where you see two opposing characters fighting for control of the same body. So, what's a parent to do? Well, that is an excellent question, and when I figure it out, I'll get back to you. Bye! No, that's not the end of the video, don't worry. The truth is, it's hard for us as parents, but especially for our kids with PDA. I don't have all the answers, I don't think anyone does, but there are a few things that we can do to help that make life easier for everybody. Number 1, reduce demands. If you have to spend an hour in a screaming match every evening trying to get your child to put their pajamas on, ask yourself this: how important is it really that they wear pajamas to bed? Will it kill them to go to bed fully clothed? I understand that as parents, a lot of the time we get into these battles simply on a matter of principle, rather than because we genuinely feel like pajamas, for example, are a necessity and a hill worth dying on. We've told our child to do something, they've said no, therefore, if we don't insist that they obey, our authority is undermined and we are useless parents. However, if your child has a PDA profile of autism, that is not the paradigm that you live in. I'll say that again for the people at the back. If your child has a PDA profile of autism, this is not the paradigm that you live in. You may be simply asking them to wear pajamas, but the amygdala perceives this seemingly innocuous demand as a threat to their very safety. In other words, you might as well be asking them to stick their hand in a blender because that's how it feels to them. Therefore, reducing the number of demands you place upon your PDA kid is essential to their well-being. Allow them more freedom to control their environment, even if it's ultimately within a framework that you have some control over. So, for example, you could offer them a choice between A, B, or C. So, would you like salt and vinegar, ready salted, or cheese and onion?
You're the worst mummy in the world!
I never said it works every time. Another very useful tool for helping to reduce the anxiety surrounding everyday tasks is to use something called declarative language. Here's an example of what declarative language isn't. This mess you've made, clean it up right now.
No!
Oh, I meant pretend kick. And here's what it is. No, there's a big mess on the floor. I wish there was someone who could help me tidy it.
I'll help you, Mummy.
Hopefully you've got the idea. Declarative language is essentially stating the nature of things or a problem and allowing your child to volunteer to fix it themselves or to volunteer a solution. Obviously, they won't always offer to help, and that's okay. I mean, when my husband tells me that the baby's done a poo, I don't always volunteer to change his nappy. But at least it means that if they do choose to help, it's entirely their choice and not you pressuring them to comply.
Resistance is futile.
Number 3, make it fun. I have not yet had the joy of parenting teenagers, so I'm not quite sure how this translates to older kids, but at least when they're little, you can try and make everyday tasks a bit less stressful by making them into a game where possible. For example, you could make getting dressed into a race, or instead of telling them to go to bed, you could say they're climbing into a space rocket and then tell them a bedtime story about their adventures in space. This is particularly helpful for PDAers as they tend to be very comfortable in role play, sometimes more so than even in real life. In fact, lots of PDAers are very good actors because they have learned that acting or adopting a different persona helps them to cope in situations where demands are being placed on them. Again, masking. Another thing that can be fun for little kids is using reverse psychology. Let's play a little game. I've got a toothbrush here, and I do not, under any circumstances, want you to brush your teeth. Do you understand? Wait, no! What are you doing? I told you not to! Stop! Just a little warning for that last one. Make sure your kid understands the difference between when you are saying no jokingly and when you're being serious about them stopping something potentially dangerous. Safety first, people. It is essential to remember that we don't use choices, declarative language, games, etc. to manipulate our children into doing what we want. It's about genuinely trying to make life a little bit less stressful for them, while still being able to have a life in some way, shape, or form. Now, like I briefly mentioned before, sometimes a PDA's anxiety levels will just be so high that nothing will help them achieve what needs to be done for that day. And as hard as it is to say, sometimes we just have to be okay with that and let it go. I think as parents, we can sometimes be a lot harder on our kids than we are even on ourselves. I think, most of us have had days where we just didn't get anything productive done, where we ignored the piles of dirty dishes, just binged Netflix and ate ice cream all day, right? No, just me? Anyway, we just remember tomorrow is a new day and it has a good chance of being a much happier day if our highly anxious children have had a break from all the stress of constantly being told what to do. Some days are going to be better than others. Now, you may be thinking at this point, none of this prepares my child for the real world. Their future boss isn't going to be offering them choices or use a special type of language or make work into a game. And the answer is no, of course not. But home isn't meant to be like the real world. It's supposed to be a safe place where we can feel free to be our most authentic selves. We don't prepare our kids to protect themselves from thieves, for example, by stealing from them now, do we? The fact is, if your kid's stress bucket is already full to the brim from all the demands that you place on them at home, plus all the demands they place on themselves, it's not going to take much for all of that stress to come flooding out at school, in the supermarket, or some other location where people won't look upon a meltdown with compassion and understanding. If, however, we do what we can to make sure the home is a safe and low-demand environment, our kids will be so much more equipped to handle moments of stress outside the safety of the home because they're not so dysregulated that they're already teetering on the edge of an explosion. There is much more to be said about PDA and what it is, how to help those with a PDA profile, and I may make more videos on it, but in the meantime, I will link some books down below that may be of help if you have a PDA in your life. Once again, thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more content. Peace out!